address the area of building community self-sufficiency. Now, I have given myself 35 minutes for this. When I started out, I had allotted an hour in the timetable, so we will do our best here to get this in a short amount of time. But this is a very serious topic, and there's much that can be said that unfortunately I won't be able to get to today. So we've heard a lot today, excuse me, about love for our neighbor. And we started out with a lot of the philosophy, and we talked about the tools from the Bill of Rights. We talked about Jefferson's hundreds. We've talked about the spiritual awakening that's needed. We've also talked about educating others and some of the practical aspects there. We talked about state sovereignty as a goal where we want to end up. And then we talked about militia and some of that, the specifics, and why there's a need there for defense and what that looks like. But now we're going to get down to a lot of the meat of, I've got one right here. I can do the, I can sit here and do the market review. So we're going to get down to some specifics here on influencing your community and impacting it. And this is what we're going to get to. We talk about how to apply love for our neighbor in practical terms. Because why do we need? First let's ask this question. Why do we need to be self-sufficient? Why even talk about something like community self-sufficiency? And the reason is because we need to be able to care for those around us. We need to be able to love our neighbor as ourselves. That means that we are providing for needs of those around us. And in order to do that, we need to have a supply. Okay? And what that does for us is it enables us to eliminate our dependence on big government, on big corporations. And we hear, the political movements all talk about, well, these are problems, and they're always dealing with, in my opinion, they're dealing with the supply. Okay, well, stuff's coming down at us. We've got to stop it. We've got to dam up the river or whatever because there's poison in the water. Well, they're not getting up to the source, to the spring. What did George Washington say? Virtue and morality is a necessary spring of popular government. In other words, government starts with the people. It starts with the communities. And if the water is poisonous, then it's because the source, the spring, is poisoned. And so you've got to change the spring. You've got to have a virtuous people again. And the people have to stop depending on what's coming down to them. We've got to start supplying and changing. So we've got to change the demand. And like I started out by saying, this is something I think this will resonate with people. If they realize, I'm talking about just normal American citizens, if they realize that what we're telling them is, we are going to provide for you, you don't have to rely on the federal government or on these corporations, because the supply is there and you're not going to, and your needs are going to be met, and we start showing them the love that they need. I think this whole conservative message, if you will, is going to make a lot more sense. So, with that, let's get into some of the practical aspects. First, I'm going to deal with a sequence of possible scenarios. And Proverbs 28:1 says, "The wicked flee when no man pursueth, but the righteous are bold as a lion." Boldness and courage. That's what virtue involves. There's several points here that I think that we could have a sequence of. We need to look at this with a perspective of boldness, but this is the reality of how this will probably play out. We've got 4 sections to our plan. There's the training groups, so that people are being educated and gaining understanding. That's kind of like what we're doing today, training. Then we've got a neighborhood group. That's where in your neighborhood, your local area, physically around you, you're going to people and you're getting them involved. Then we have what we might call crisis mobilization, where the people that you have brought together within your community then action together, and specifically in response to a problem. And as Patricia put it, I like how she says, a natural or man-made disaster. And then finally, post-crisis rebuilding, because what we're going to come to, there's probably going to be a lot of little crises, but there will eventually come a point where there is a major disaster of some sort in our country, in all likelihood, and we need to be ready for that, and that will give us an opportunity to actually have a fresh beginning, I believe. So we can call that a rebuilding stage. I think these are somewhat addressed in Scripture. I would encourage you to read Proverbs 27 and 28. That if you want more of a biblical background on some of these concepts that we've discussed and are going to discuss on the virtue solution, and in particular in regards to communities. Let's see. Let me see if I can read here just a couple of verses for you. Proverbs 27, 8 and 10. Says, as a bird that wandereth from her nest, so is a man that wandereth from his place. So in other words, don't wander away from where God has put you, bloom where you're planted. And then verse 10 says, thine own friend and thy father's friend forsake not, neither go into thy brother's house in the day of thy calamity. For better is a neighbor that is near than a brother far off. So the Scripture is telling us, know your neighbors and go to them and make them who you're depending on in a time of calamity. In verse 12, it says, a prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple, means the foolish, pass on and are punished. And then in verse 17, it says, iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. Now, I think a lot of us have heard that verse. Iron sharpens iron, importance of friendship. But I don't know that a lot of people realize that's in the context of a troubled time. You're actually, what you're doing is you're depending on your friend, and iron is sharpening iron. That is, you are helping each other and contributing to each other's success, even though it might be hard. Right? And you are exercising virtue to do the difficult things. And what happens? The countenance of your friend is sharpened. The countenance, it literally has to do with the face, but in the context of turning. That your face is turning, and it's doing what? It's making decisions. You're turning here, you're turning there. I think we could call this liberty. So we don't want to read into it too much here, but it's the idea that as you sharpen the countenance of your friend, what you're doing is you're helping him to make the right decisions, which means he's more free. That's what liberty is. It's making the right decisions. So virtue is the key to liberty. So we have these four areas, and I think that those are mentioned there. Some of that structure is addressed, and what you have there is your with the iron sharpening iron would be then the result, the rebuilding, that liberty is more seen after this catastrophe, if you will. Let's go over some needed community skills. There's 5 that I've narrowed down, and of course there's many more things, but this is 5 to get us started. We need spiritual leadership, self-defense, engineering, preparedness, and medicine. And these are, and I want you to be thinking as I continue to speak, what skills can I contribute within one of these categories? Is there one that I have been specially gifted by God to help to sharpen the countenance of my friends, as it were, so that someone can come to my place of business or my home in a time of adversity. Spiritual leadership, we have several important things there. Major ones would be certainly church oversight. We need pastors. We also need counseling. People are going to need emotional and spiritual counseling. Self-defense, of course, Patricia's gone over this one a lot. Firearm use and safety, tactical training as well as strategic training, and then an emergency response structure. And I would see the person who is dealing with this self-defense area as also dealing with being in a position of leadership to guide a a response structure in the time of an emergency. And then we have engineering, and engineering is going to be a large section, especially because of how technological our society is today. There's going to be a lot of need for that. I have 5 areas under that: shelter construction, energy, which could be renewable energy, ideally, of course, solar power, wind, hydroelectric is very good. That goes along with the next one: water, communications, such as the internet. If the internet goes down, you need to know what to do. And then machinery. Then the 4th skill area is preparedness. And preparedness is dealing specifically with being ready in case of, a time of crisis. These are more, these first 3 were more just day-to-day issues that you can help your community to be successful. Then the preparedness, though, is specifically in regards to a crisis. So you need food, is one of the biggest things you will also need. If the rest of these are already provided for, these are things you're going to have need of. Food, material resources, to make more, or what I call this capital resources, to create more things. And we could include finances under that, or money, potentially, if it's needed. And then an emergency response plan. So that the person who's the preparedness, my thinking here would be that they are most equipped to put a plan together, but may not be the most equipped to carry it out. And so that's why I have the self-defense person more in a leadership type position, so that they would take the plan that's been given to them and help to execute it. Where the preparedness person might be, it could be anybody. It could be an old lady who, this is what she does. She takes care of things like that. Yes, sir.
Josiah, I don't mean to start a discussion, but under material resources and finances, do you mean like if the banks are closed?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. That's good input there and help. And then E, the 5th skill is medicine. I've divided that into 3 sections as well. Basic first aid, which really everybody should have some background in that. But, the American Red Cross teaches it. There's a lot of good places to learn basic first aid. But you might have somebody specifically skilled in that. And this is also, again, this is going back then again to the day-to-day needs of the community. Basic first aid, nutrition and health, certainly a huge need. People need to know how to be healthy. Evan mentioned about the issue of cancer, and that there are a lot of medicines that are nutritional or herbal or alternative that work, and we need people who know about them. And then we also need to know that a trauma and injury response, and this is where maybe your traditional medical doctor would also be certainly of value. So then we're going to move on as quickly as we can here to the Jeffersonian principles. Those are the ones who Jefferson mentioned in his Jefferson's Hundreds plan. And those were, again, 2 letters that he wrote, one to Samuel Kirschfall and one to John Tyler. It's primarily where we get this plan from, where he envisioned the plan of 100 households each. So if America came to the brink of tyranny, we would divide into groups of 100. Now he said that these groups would choose these 5 things: the constable, Patricia mentioned, the constable, a schoolmaster, a local militia captain, a justice of the peace, and 1 or 2 jurors, depending on the community. The local militia captain I connect to the self-defense area. The schoolmaster could theoretically also go into the spiritual leadership portion, or vice versa, that is. That somebody who was exercising a pastoral role could also teach and educate. Then we also have things like, or the schoolmaster could also do some of these others, such as the engineering. I think that would be appropriate as well. It's up to each community, and that's one of the things that we're emphasizing too, is that this isn't going to be a cookie-cutter plan. You're going to have to use some creativity and decide what are the needs of my community. But these are trying to give you something of an outline, something to go off of. Justice of the peace, we'll come back to that here in a minute. And then jurors, we of course mentioned about the jury and how they would be selected. Basically, you would have 6 wards that would each choose 2 jurors for a jury at a given time. Before we move on, I think we need a few leadership basics because I know probably a lot of people at this point are wondering, well, how am I going to get all this done? And how am I going to try to, get into my community and influence people, and they're going to have to follow me, and I'm going to have to explain all this to them. I've been drinking from a fire hose, and how am I going to exactly communicate this to other people? So let me give you a couple of thoughts that hopefully are of help, which is, one, you already are a leader. Now that is a revolutionary concept to some people, because some people think of our leaders, okay, well, President Obama, he's our leader. Well, no. You are the leaders of this country. And I don't just mean that in the sense, necessarily of authority, although that's also true if you say we the people of the United States. But leadership is not the same thing as authority. What I'm talking about is influence. And I'm talking about the effect that you can have. You already have an effect on people. It's just a matter of what kind of effect you're having. Because people all around you are always going to see you. And you're going to be giving them a message of some sort. It's not a question of whether, it's a question of what. So you need to make sure that your message is correct. And so what I'm telling you is it's not like this is going to be anything drastically different necessarily. This is just making your message correct, and I think doing it in the right way. Now that said, there's a proper leadership and there's an improper leadership. Proper leadership looks like love, service, and thoughtful action toward a goal. In other words, a lot of people, they lead, in a sense, they influence others without having any particular goal in mind. And so it's kind of like a chaos, because everybody's going their own ways and saying their own thoughts, and there's not really a particular goal. So this basically just gives you a goal. Now, improper leadership is the opposite of that. It's pride, selfishness, control, and or apathy. A lot of people are apathetic leaders. They are in a position where they should be influencing others, and they don't do anything with it. They abdicate their responsibility, as Patricia used that term. So use the leadership that God has given you, and understand that it needs to be exercised correctly. And then, secondly, just take some of the pressure off you, hopefully, which is don't expect to have a large group overnight. This is a long-term project. We might be all working on this the rest of our lives. We're not saying that, this is going to happen in the blink of an eye. What we're doing is something that it's going to catch on slowly, person by person, family by family, and it doesn't have to be any other way. Yes, it's true that we're, in a sense, short on time in our country, but if the Lord wants us to have, salvation as a civilization, He can bring that about. We need to make sure that we are faithful and do the right things, and we're not under some kind of, we're not like under the gun to try to make this work. Now, I will say this, healthy groups tend to grow roughly within what we might call a Fibonacci sequence or golden ratio curve. How many of y'all know what I mean by that? Good. We've got some smart people. So the Fibonacci curve is, it means you start with one number, and then you add that number to itself, and then you add the previous 2 numbers, and so on, and you keep adding the previous 2 numbers. So the sequence is 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and so on. And so but you usually start with just yourself. You go 1, and then you still have 1, and then you get to 2, and you usually have a co-organizer that'll step up to the plate at some point. I was privileged to have Jonathan be somewhat of a co-organizer and step up to the plate. Then you have 3, and Jim step it up, right? And then you kind of go to 5, and then you go to 8, and basically it's a pattern similar to that. Okay, that's how groups typically work. But it might just be you for a while, and that's okay. Again, just be faithful. leader with you who can, in leadership theory, they talk about this, just even in the secular world about that really the second person is sometimes more the leader than the first person, because the first person, they've got all these ideas. Everybody has their own ideas, but that person that comes alongside you and supports you, that's the person that's the most important, and you need to find that person in your community. And ask for small commitments first, and you start small and work big. That's a biblical principle. That those who are faithful in that which is least are faithful in that which is much, and that's true for you, and that's true for people who are in your community. So let's go through a progression of action. Mr. Hill, how much time do we have?
We've got about 15 minutes left.
Okay. All right, so we've got about 7 or 8 steps in regards to how to move forward in just getting really right down to brass tacks here now. The first thing that we're going to encourage everyone to do is go door to door canvassing. And you can access voter lists or precinct lists of some sort. There's plenty of information online. You can use local maps or Google, and you can plot a walking route in your community. Of course, before you head out the door, you want to write down a basic plan of what to say to your neighbors. And just kind of dig down in your mind and think about, okay, what did I hear? Oh yeah, Josiah said, virtue is to liberty, what the soul is to the body. Oh, okay, right. Jim, he said we've got to be responsible and work off of natural law. And oh yeah, Jonathan, he was over there saying how personal peace and affluence have become our gods in America. So think about, and hopefully this syllabus. That's why I was very thankful that everybody was able to get a syllabus that was sponsored, by the way. Somebody paid for these, but because hopefully this will help you, give you the foundation to work off of and bring some of that back to your mind. So anyway, write a basic conversational idea of what you want to say, and then go knock on doors and sign people up. Have a pad of paper. Sign people up. Make a note of obviously what their address is, so you don't get everybody confused afterwards, and what they said. And basically, the message that I would give is: are you interested in strengthening our community? We believe that virtue, exercised at the ground level, is the cure for what ails our country. And would you be willing to be a good neighbor and help to take care of me, and I'll take care of you? And it doesn't even have to be as complicated as that. For that matter, it can just be, I'd like to get to know you better. It's very simple. So, and then what you do want to do then is get to a point where, in that first initial conversation where you ask to come back to their house with some further information. And you might have a flyer, a brochure that we've got, and everybody's welcome to those brochures. You might hand that off, you might create something of your own, and come back to their house later. Now, best idea is probably to start with those who you already know. Of course, that helps you to get started, helps you to, if you know your neighbors already, obviously that's a good point. You start with people who you've already contacted. But then don't stop there, because what you don't want to do is just stay within your comfort zones. Jonathan mentioned this morning, which I think is so crucial to everything we're doing, which is at some point you've got to get uncomfortable. And if all you do is talk to the people you've already talked to in the past for whatever reason, you're not really exercising virtue in the sense of courage. You're more just talking to the people you knew. So you got to get out and talk to some strangers, and I'm going to have to do this too. So y'all don't. Anyway, I will be able to better give you some further information, but I go door knocking a lot, but it's more for political things. So this is going to be a little new for me as well, as far as the neighborhood aspect. So we're all in this together. But get uncomfortable. So then, okay, so that's the door-to-door canvassing aspect. The next thing that we move to is once you've kind of made those contacts, I would invite them to a community dinner or meeting of some kind. Usually you want to have food, okay? That's typically how they work, okay? Typically want to serve food in a meeting like this. You reserve a time and place, obviously. You don't tell everybody, oh, we're going to have the meeting, and then you have to go get the place. You don't have to have a place before you tell people you're going to have a meeting, but you do have to have a time. You have to say, okay, this is my time, and I'm going to start telling people that time. If for some reason you can't find a place, it's not the end of the world, but worst case, you can always invite them to your house. So, you might consider that.
Why is that worst case?
It's not worst case. Sorry. I'm thinking the old way. Okay, no, that's a good thought. It's a good idea to invite people to your house.
That would probably be best case.
It'd probably be best case. That's
It's
correct.
very relational.
Yes, that's good. Good point. And yes, sir.
We've already written some stuff, and we do have resources. One of the specific things might be a backyard barbecue. There's a lot of other things that specifically want to identify that Josiah just kind of jumped over it, actually in a move too. But maybe tonight we'll go into some more of those, like raising bunnies, helping people with food, organic food, health issues, definitely studying nutrition, and those kinds of things, so that when we go to somebody's door, we've got something specific to give them, not just our plan, but our love, our virtue. What can we do for you?
Yes, that's a very good point. All right. You might also have a basic flyer showing your vision for the community. Again, yes, that's exactly what my dad's saying is correct. That we're not just asking, what can you do for us? We're asking them, what can we do for you? And then come back to the folks who sign up on that level and invite them to come to the dinner or meeting or barbecue. And then in that sense, you also have to bring folks to a certain understanding on what we're doing and why. Some people just come for the fun. And you gotta kind of have to think about, okay, who is it I'm really gonna have to mentor here, and who can I cultivate? So just be in mind. Once you get everybody to a certain level of understanding, here's what I would say is I think what we need to do is to ask people to pledge to care for and defend one another. And you start out by basically determining that several households are on the same page. So to start out, you might have, I would say, probably about 5 or 6 households, maybe not that many. You can't get that many. But after a couple months or so, if you have that many, you can do this, and you just ask them to pledge to care for and defend one another. Then you ask, and this is something, I would compare this, something similar to the Mayflower Compact. Okay, when the founders, the original Pilgrim fathers, not the constitutional founders, but the actual Pilgrims came to this country, they originally planned to sail to Virginia. How many of you knew that? Okay, they planned to sail to Virginia, and they were blown off course, and the reason they landed in Massachusetts, I believe it was providential, but they landed in Massachusetts by a total accident. But when they found out that they didn't come to the right place, and there's really no constituted government there that could protect them, they compacted with each other, and that was what the Mayflower Compact was. We joined together as a civil body politic for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith. So, and that's essentially what we're doing here. We're not saying we're taking up, the sword. We're not saying that we're becoming a civil government even necessarily, but we are in a civic sense compacting together. And you might emphasize a certain need, if there is one that you've put your finger on: health, crime protection, education, spiritual encouragement, or something else. And what you'll get to is a point where you want to address where would be a gathering point for your community in a time of crisis. And this starts the conversation. You might set aside a piece of land somewhere. We've talked about this, and the need there would be to actually divide it in advance by family, because you don't want to get to a point where, oh, it's a crisis, and now everybody flocks there, and now you have to set up everything, and it's almost like communistic. That's not what we're going for, okay? We're not reigniting communism. Okay, this is not that model. Yes, sir?
So is this partly secretive in the start time? Is it kind of quiet, kept quiet?
Well, it's just that there's certain things that are going to offend people. If you don't, if you try to, you know, oh, America's going down the tubes and here's why you need to, you know, everybody needs to have a gun and whatever. You're starting out as a good neighbor, you know, and you're addressing the specific needs of your community. So it's not that you're being secretive, I don't think. I think it's just identifying who is most apt to, you know, be a benefit. And so does that make sense? Jim, do you have something to add to that?
I think, again, we've talked about this some, but each person, each area, the story's going to be a little bit different every place. And so some people, they might have neighbors that are really ready to it just clicks with them. They all of a sudden understand everything you're talking about. And in that case, you know, you're good to go and you can move faster than somebody that is having to educate and convince their neighbors every step of the way.
Right.
But you're going to find yourself in one scenario or another, and you're going to have to adjust your pace and your focus for your own individual needs. And so again, this is not to say, like you said, it's not cookie cutter. Don't say you got to do it exactly this way. You got to use your head, because we got to learn critical thinking and develop our own little plan for our own little group that's going to be a little bit different from somebody else's little group.
Absolutely. Yeah. So every group is different, that's for sure. All right, we're going to move real fast through the next two. You're going to nurture your community to meet the necessary, to fill the necessary roles. Everybody, I would say this, everybody I think is going to have to learn something. I don't think we're all going to just be able to be knowledge givers. I think we're all going to have to learn. And we need to be ready to do that. And those who have skills are going to need to train others. We need to be humble enough to both to learn and humble enough to train other people. And you might have specific action groups within your community. There's a lot of things you can do there. You can also, and eventually at a point, you're going to also put people into roles as the Jeffersonian principals. And again, you're not trying to replace the constituted government, but you're trying to put these contingency plans into place. And there's also the option I'll throw out here that at some point your community may decide to become a church within the local New Testament model, and that's perfectly fine too. It's just that at that point you would not have any civic power. You would have to determine that you're going to be different than a civic group. You're going to be solely spiritually based. I don't believe that a church as such is to wield the sword. Okay, I think it is separate in Scripture. So it's up to the community as far as if they are all Bible-believing Christians, you know, they could go into a church system. We're not opposed to that, but for what we're concerned with, this is the civic side. So,
But like with Dr. Baldwin, if you remain unincorporated as the body of Christ, then you could actually fulfill the non-501c3 exclusions,
yes.
which is really a part of it.
Exactly, and it's not that people who are in a church cannot have a civic authority. We're saying they do need to. Everybody has civic responsibility in Scripture. So, as far as in the biblical worldview, I mean, like what Evan brought out, that they would have their church services, and then afterward they would have their political meeting, whatever, for the precinct. So, and that's fine. So anyway, it just needs to be, I think the groups need to be differentiated though. So then, but then finally, and this is important to mention, because so that we have in mind all the possibilities. There's an option which follows a crisis, which we call self-determination. And I would strongly underline the idea that this is not to be taken lightly. Self-determination is a natural power that all groups can possess if they are able to fulfill responsibilities. There's a common law maxim that says this. It says protection and allegiance are reciprocal. That means whatever power protects you, you owe your loyalty to that power. If they do not protect you, then you don't owe your loyalty to them. And there's two ways that this can happen. The constituted government can abdicate. That means they declare that they will no longer protect you, and this is exactly what happened in the American Revolution. There was actually an act of Parliament called the Prohibitory Act that they stated we will no longer protect the 13 colonies. And that was what precipitated the Declaration of Independence. But then the other thing that you can have happen is what we might call default, where they're simply not able to protected anymore. This is what we might see in something like a full-scale economic collapse. So you can then rightly exercise the Romans 13 sword as a community if needed, but you can't ever go back. At that point, you have a responsibility, within that body of protecting the citizens, and so it's not something to be taken lightly. So with that said, so in sum, all this is, as Dr. Bob Jones Sr. said, do right till the stars fall. And virtue is doing right, and it's doing